day. And also, if you lose your internet connection, you just need to reconnect using the link I made you and you used to log in today. And if you have any other questions, just use the chat box. You can send questions to Paula from Wings, my colleague, and she can help you out with technical difficulties. And if you have no audio, you can go to audio at the top menu on the left-hand side and click on audio conference. Then it should connect you to the audio. And you're all muted automatically, but if you need to speak or if you have questions or comments, just unmute yourself by clicking on the red mic by your name. So for those of you who don't know Wings that well, and Wings is a global network of associations and support organizations serving philanthropy. We have 151 members in over 50 countries. So Wings strives to promote and strengthen the philanthropy sector. And one of the ways of doing it is by learning and sharing knowledge. And as part of our goal to systematize and share information, we are putting together a Global Philanthropy Data Charter, and you received the draft by email prior to this webinar. But we are not doing this alone. We are, of course, inviting different organizations working in the sector for a consultation process. Barry Knight, who is working with us in this and other data-related projects, will give you now in this webinar an overview of the charter. And after each section is presented, you'll be given the opportunity to ask questions and make comments. I'd just like to ask you to please keep it short and concise due to the limited time we have. But please do feel free to send us questions by email or write them down on the chat box on the right-hand side, and then I'll make sure they're addressed. And we intend to have a consultation process for a year, so we'll have several occasions to address any concerns you may have. So now I'll pass the floor to Barry, who'll be talking more about the charter.
Oh, can you hear me? It's Barry here. I'm pleased to welcome you and to see such a great turnout of people for this session. As Anna pointed out, this is the first of many opportunities to influence the way the charter is developed. After all, it needs to be our charter and it needs to be owned by all of us. And Wings, being an organization that likes to develop a participative approach, one where everyone who's involved in it gets a say, it's important that we go through quite a thorough process of creating and adjusting our work here. The background to the charter really is that it's a sign that the field of philanthropy is expanding very fast and also growing up around its needs for data, and seeing that the development of effective strategies is really dependent on having good information, good data that backs it up, and that the purpose of data, or good use of information, is to help our philanthropic sector begin to address the kind of social needs and have a much bigger impact than it would without that data. And I think that we're already beginning to see changes in the way that people think about information and data. Only yesterday I was with a group at the EFC when we were thinking about planning the meeting in Copenhagen, and how important the doing research into the needs of participants is in that respect. At the same time, this as well as the kind of opportunity of doing this charter, there are some real challenges ahead of us. It's not going to be an easy task, and we need to face those challenges head on and not duck them. I mean, the fact is that there are different legislations and classification systems in different parts of the world. I did some work recently looking at what the situation is in Nigeria, and it's very difficult to classify the word foundation, for example. Secondly, countries are at different levels with different needs. I mean, we're very much in the state of one size not fitting all. There is not any single template that we can impose on the world that would fit the needs of our sector. The third real big challenge is the unclear property rights and controls of data in different parts of the world. Data is correlated with freedom, and not everyone is in favor of the free flow of information. Also, there are propriety issues about who owns what. And the other thing that we need to be aware of is that not every part of the world approaches technology equally, and we need to be aware of that and to take account of that in developing our understanding in this field. So this brings us to the Charter itself, and what the Charter is intended to do is to provide a vision for the sector's data management and to see what we want to get out of it. This is, as I say, this is our Charter. It's not being imposed on us. It's something that that Wings is developing as a support to the field. It's not something that we have to do, but it is something that we want to do in order to, you know, raise our game, as it were. And the Charter will need to recognize those tensions that exist that I mentioned, also to find agreement on standards and acknowledge the kind of local issues, the fact that context does matter. Things are different in different places, and we need to be sensitive to that and make sure that that kind of variation is a strength rather than a kind of weakness. There is not a single protocol that can deliver everything. And also to recognize that this is not a mandatory document. It's not something that is going to have powers. It's something that is meant to enhance practice, not to govern practice. Nor is the Charter set in stone. It's something that will guide the improvement of our understanding of information, knowledge, and hopefully lead to wisdom. Now, Anna at the beginning said that we are, doing a year-long process, which will culminate. We hope to launch this Charter at the Wings Forum in around a year's time. We've held one meeting from people from all over the world. I think every continent was represented. It wasn't a representative meeting in the sense that we didn't have everybody there who needs to be actually involved in this. In fact, we need to consult much more widely. And really, the meeting itself had four main stages. It was run over, as it were, 2.5 days, and we did some preparatory work to work out what we felt the participants of the meeting felt that a Charter should do. We did ask people to do some homework so that we came to the meeting really with an understanding of how participants saw the issues, and we presented that to the group. And then secondly, we tried to build some trust within the group so that people could begin to share as equals the kinds of issues that they needed to discuss between themselves, to become a kind of a team. And I think that was very successful. People worked in groups and identified really critical issues between themselves, and that enabled the sort of third step to really to highlight the really issues and get them out there. And then finally, the group actually drafted the Charter and the next steps. This wasn't something that the the Wings did. It was something that the participants at the meeting did for themselves, so that we know that the draft that we are about to kind of go through is very much a first draft. It's not something that's been highly developed beyond that meeting. We did simply edit it and try to clean it up a bit so it looked better. But the essential work was done at that meeting. And that the idea was we want to work on a create and adjust principle. We've created this. We know it won't look anything like this at the end, but some of the things, we hope some of the principles will stand the test of time through this consultation, and it is all there to be improved. Now, the Charter's outline, there are, we're going to focus on four key dimensions of this Charter. We decided there would be context and purpose, there would be values and principles, special considerations and tensions, and enablers, things that would enable the field to develop better kind of data methods, and then finally an annex. As we go through each one of these items, I'm going to go through each page, and then we're going to, at the end of each section, we're going to stop and have a discussion of that page, and that you'll be welcome to put forward your thoughts, your comments, your critiques, your suggestions, your improvements as we go, and they will be recorded, and we will begin to redraft the Charter as it takes shape, the ideas that come on board, so that this is a living process, so that by the time we get to Istanbul in around a year's time, this will have been through a thorough, kind of rigorous, critical process in which the authors of this will be multiple and very different from different parts of the world, so that there won't be at all a single author of this. This will be written by the field for the field. So that's where we want to go. So I'm just going to go into the five main things about the context and the purpose. The first thing is to why are we doing this, and why are we doing it now? Well, the fact is that the field is growing. The emerging markets of philanthropy are all over the world. The economy of the world has shifted east and south. There are now 3,000 foundations in China. The Charities Aid Foundation has identified 300 in Russia. We have an emerging data infrastructure. Not only the Foundation Center, but other groups have begun to get into this field, and we have the promise of technology. When it works, it's wonderful. The context and the benefits of data, I mean, the value of understanding what you're doing, building a comprehensive picture of what philanthropy is like, getting better data to support decision making and impact. There are new opportunities for cooperation between parts of the world that couldn't cooperate before, beginning to influence other sectors, having more visibility. And then the third item, the vision of the Charter. The Rio meeting came up with this really rather, I thought, catchy phrase: global data for better philanthropy. Fourth, the assumptions that we should focus on philanthropy data and data that can be used. And finally, the audience, organizations that gather and provide and support data for philanthropy. So that's where we are, and that's where we need to. I'm going to pause now for people to make comments, and we'll have about 5 minutes, I think, for comments on this particular part of the section.
Hi, it's Anna. Just before any comments or questions, I'd like to highlight that it's very interesting that we managed to come up with 7 kind of concrete benefits for this charter, for having a charter, and also that the group of participants, apart from being a technical working group, that's people that actually work with data. They're also from different backgrounds and different sorts of organizations, not only foundations, and associations, support organizations, research centers, consultancies. So it's a different kind of group of people that worked really well together. We're from very different backgrounds, so we could get diverse opinions about the topics.
Anybody want to contribute about the context and purpose?
Okay, thanks. So maybe we can go over to the next section and see if anyone has any questions then. And of course, if you have questions at the end of the webinar, please feel free to write questions here on the chat box. Thanks. And Barry?
Okay. So I think the second key part of the drafting of the charter was around the values and principles, and we felt that the group that met in Rio felt that really values and principles needed to be at the heart of this, and these should be brought right up front and should cover the ownership, issues of interpretation versus risk, feedback, and how we work. And issues that were highlighted really were inclusion, diversity, and respect. Important that philanthropy and social investment activities are more effective and sustainable when they include a broad and diverse range of actors, and to encourage sharing regardless of their membership in formal associations, and while inclusive, broad definitions are desirable and some level of standards is feasible, but recognizing the critical importance of different contexts in emerging forms of philanthropy. Philanthropy is not a single thing we need to, it's not something that can be easily coded, and it varies, quite markedly across different parts of the world. We discussed particularly issues of knowledge sharing and collaboration, the open architecture and distributed leadership, the importance of openness and feedback, responsible distribution, interpretation, and use. Those were the main kinds of things that we thought of. I suppose I could ask a question to say, do you think there are things that are there and not there, things that we should actually be including that aren't currently in the charter? Over to participants.
Can people hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, this is Helena. Barry, I think I can't remember if it's in the draft or presented here today, but we had some discussion at the meeting about 2 things. That was quality of data, data quality, and also accessibility of data. Are those things already reflected in this draft, or those are things that need to be added?
Right. Okay. Well, that's pretty critical. Data quality, we certainly discussed a lot at the meeting.
I think we forgot to register in the document.
Right. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Well, that's something we need to put right. Thank you. Thank you, Helena. Any other omissions? Anybody from the group want to add? Are there things that you feel that we should perhaps change or emphasize more?
Barry, this is Nick.
Hello, Nick.
Hi. Could you flesh out a little bit more of what you mean by distributed leadership here?
Well, I think that one of the things that's really critical about this field is that there is no command economy. There is nowhere in that has the kind of holds the unique locus of power that's centralized. That in a sense, what we really need that the field is not organized hierarchically. It's organized laterally. There are researchers, practitioners, consultants, associations of grant makers, there are foundations, there are community foundations. They don't organize themselves in a way that you know, resembles a formal organization, and that what we need to do is to try to, as it were, include all of those in a collaborative lateral model of leadership where everybody has some responsibility and some rights within that. I mean, Wings itself is a very flat organization in the sense that it's based on association. It's based on people taking responsibility across the world. There's no command. There's nobody who can tell people what to do. So what we really needed to do is to build a collaborative model where and distributive leadership is really a sense in which people we put power to those parts of the system that are most able to use it, and so that we have a kind of open architecture where people can come into the system and fit in without feeling that they have to account to anybody else, but except through their own moral stance and moral values.
Okay, no, thank you, and I certainly appreciate the distributed necessity, imperative here. It's a little bit the leadership was, because sometimes that idea gets overused. So I wanted to, understand better.
It means the very opposite of centralized leadership, and I think that Wings is an organization that facilitates knowledge sharing, knowledge learning, so that we want to distribute knowledge and power, because Francis Bacon said knowledge is power. Well, we need to have that power distributed, and we therefore need leadership to be distributed too. So that it's not Wings doesn't hold the power here. It's actually a sharing knowledge, and it's about getting it out there and making people feel responsible for themselves and for their own learning.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else like to contribute to this?
Hello, Barry. Okay, go ahead.
Hello, Barry. This is Rosine Herveyer from EFC.
Hello. Hi.
Hello, everybody. I'm not sure how to go about this, because we have shared some of our comments with Wings, and they go sort of across the different chapters. But maybe at this point of values and principles, I'm not sure how in this lineup you work the idea of data ownership and accessibility, and as such, I think it's not directly mentioned. It can be understood when you talk about distributed leadership or openness and feedback, etc. But I think it's extremely important that the charter says something about ownership of data and accessibility.
Yes, thank you, Rosine. I think that is an important point, and I think it's likely to be one of the tensions that we face.
So, sorry, again, I'm not sure how to exactly. This is why, for example, in the first slide, you also talked about we have an issue, and maybe that's also a tension on how exactly do you define certain concepts. Also, you talk about audiences, which is sort of confusing. But anyway, I mean. Maybe we should wait until the end of your slides, and then I can share some of those concerns.
Okay. Thank you.
Hi, and Pushpa would like to make a comment too.
Yeah, hi, Barry. I did not attend the meeting, so I don't know if this has been discussed, but this one of the things that I think should be included is about linkages with other data, other types of data, especially because I see that in one of the assumptions in the note, it says to focus on philanthropy data, not data on what some call civil society, non-profits, NGOs. I come from the GuideStar type of data where our focus is collecting information on NGOs, but we work in a context where, the definition of foundations is not clear, and foundations in our setup are a subset of NGOs. And the character of, whether foundations are implementing or givers, I mean, there's so much of lack of clarity there that I think it's important for this kind of data to also have a kind of linkage with the other data sets. I mean, there needs to be at certain points some kind of convergence, some kind of corroboration of data that comes from different types of groups. So I don't know whether this is there. I mean, this gets included in inclusion, but I thought a mention about linkages with other data groups of types of data would kind of be something that could be like a guiding value and principle for the group as it goes forward.
I think that's a very important point, Pushpa. Thank you. I think in our drafting, what we were thinking was that the primary focus should be on philanthropy in this rather than broader civil society. But I think you make an important point that in terms of understanding philanthropy, then the relationships with other types of data needs to be made clear. And we certainly need to clarify that. I think that's a very helpful point. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Any others?
Just as a follow-up to this, Barry, does the group understand philanthropy to be in terms of financial resources only, or how did that get discussed at the meeting?
It was discussed but not resolved, and I think that we were taking a fairly broad line of philanthropy. It's not just about money, although that's the precise definition of philanthropy is something that we need to work on and work up, because it means different things in different places. And I think we really need to kind of do some work on the different types of philanthropy and develop some kind of better typology than there is at the moment. And I think we got to the situation in the meeting where we recognize that the term philanthropy is one with you can either define it very simply as the accumulation of private resources for public benefit, or you can go into a much more sophisticated and variegated kind of definition. And I think that, in a sense, the field needs to work on that, and I think we need to reflect on that in the Charter. Though I also think we need not to get so bogged down in the definition of what it is we're talking about that we spend all of our time on that. So I think it's something that we really need to think about more. And certainly there were some people in the meeting who felt that the primary thing should be on resource flows across the world, and there were others who felt that one needed to go into other and different directions. So I think so far we haven't really resolved that, and we need to do more work on that. Thank you.
Barry, just adding to that, I think it's important to stress to the group, especially people that are joining us today and were not at the meeting in Rio, that we are just starting the work now. So there are a lot of issues that are not fully clear to people because we are working on those, we're discussing, and we're hoping that as this work evolves with the working group, we will have more clarity on each one of the topics. But it is expected to have some sort of, I wouldn't say confusion, but a lot of questions at this point. And we don't have all the answers yet because, as you say, Barry, we're still discussing it. So this is really the best time for everybody to share your comments and opinions freely. It's really the best. We're collecting your input right now to advance the discussion. This is by no means a document that's ready for approval, but it's really an initial discussion.
Yes, that's exactly right. And we, this is not something we're doing to the field. This is something we want the field to do for itself. So in a way that the final document will take the shape of what the field wants rather than anything that we want to do. We see ourselves as facilitating the development of this, not really controlling the content of it. And that's very important. And if people feel that we should do more work on defining philanthropy, then we should, and we shouldn't do just us, not us to do that, but we should all do that, because as I say, philanthropy is a term that means different things in different contexts. I'm going to move on to the next slide because we've kind of strayed away from the discussion of values and principles to the general thing, and I'd like to leave some time at the end for some general comments like this. So let's move on. Here we have three of the sort of special considerations stroke tensions, and we've already Rosine also already brought up one that's really kind of important, which is about issues of access and ownership. And here I think the open and public issue comes to the fore. Whose data? Do you pay for it? What are the, how do we protect privacy? What are those kinds of issues? Really, we began to address those issues, and as Helena said a moment ago, we've kind of identified them and written preliminary drafts of these things, but I think we really need your help and assistance in terms of moving that forward. The second big issue, standardization. We've talked about this before. One size does not fit all, and clearly, if you define philanthropy in a very broadest sense of giving, giving occurs in different ways, in different situations, in different parts of the world, in very different ways. Although there is an underpinning, human a kind of impulse that governs it, we shouldn't be looking at data. We shouldn't be looking at the frameworks we use to collect data to define our reality. We should be actually trying to get at reality and using frameworks that actually develop that. And the final point, that really came out in our discussions was the issue of standards. And here, the issue of quality comes up, the usableness of things, issues of misuse and so on. There are a whole range of things that we could begin tensions to manage in this field, and these, of course, are not unique always to philanthropy. That anyone has these kinds of issues occur in other data settings, but those are the ones that we identified at the meeting. So I'd be really interested in, if there are other things that you think that we should be included here, or things that we should pay particular attention to.
Hi, Barry. Hi, Anna, and everybody else. This is Barbara.
Oh, hello, Barbara.
I'm, first of all, extremely impressed by the amount of ground you all covered in the workshop. It's just a tremendous amount of work, and it makes us jumping in at this point so much easier to have this great outline. On the issues that we were just talking about, I want to raise attention, which I'm sure is familiar to many people in developing regions, and that is that the only data that really now exists on philanthropy is held by governments and is not shared and is required by those regulatory authorities in order to remain licensed as a philanthropy. So it's not even offered voluntarily. So I would really hope that we would address that, and that we would think about ways to be inclusive and to bring along the governments around the world so that they're part of this process, but also so we begin to unlock some of their really rich, incredibly rich sources of data that we currently don't have access to.
Well, yeah, thank you for that contribution. That's absolutely great. And I think you're right. We do need to bring along governments, I echo the point of that. Really, we got a draft, and it's very much a first draft, so that we just felt we needed to get something out there rather than feel that that this was the end point.
Hi, Rosa. Would you like to make a comment?
Yes, please. Again, maybe not everybody knows me. I represent EFC at this, and we have I think a large experience in dealing with data in a context that is very, very diverse, and these tensions are also very much familiar. But in our experience, it depends a lot how you resolve those tensions. Depends also from what the ultimate objective is for which you collect these data. And I realized in the first chart that you shared, Barry, you had a long list of goals that we want to achieve with this data. And I wonder if in the meeting, which unfortunately EFC could not attend, if there was some sort of prioritization in what will be the primary goal of this exercise, because that may help us also to sort of guide us in these in choosing between these tensions.
I think the prime. I mean, the document you see is what was drafted out of the meeting. So it's got the strengths of what the people did at the meeting. It's also got the weakness that it wasn't. Nobody could actually reflect on it afterwards. And so, in a sense, I think we have what we have, and we need to kind of develop the goal. But I think the critical piece is a document that actually helps us surmount these kinds that states the values, that guides action, that overcomes these kinds of issues, considerations, and tensions, and that builds the field. As I said, it's not something that can compel anyone, but can actually facilitate the development of data-driven understanding of the sector of philanthropy. So I think that's where it's coming from, and actually trying to join up different bits of the field so that we can address these kinds of issues, that they're happening all in different kinds of places, and to try to have some kind of global conversation about this and come up with something that, you know, is better than what we have at the moment. I think that's really where we are. Rosa, you wanted to say something?
I would like to comment on what Barbara just said about governments. And I remember that we did talk about this in Rio. Unfortunately, I don't recall exactly what our conclusion was. But I mean, we faced this in Spain, and there I talk about my experience in Spain, that the supervising authorities, and I'm talking particularly about foundations, they gather a lot of data that could be very useful, but it could only be useful if it's treated in some way. I mean, having the charter will help any agent in the world, whether they are foundations or they are researchers or they are supervising authorities, to have a clear framework on how the data can be used and how can it be collected. And also the work with the governments is done, I think, in a big share by the umbrella organizations or the national organizations. So, yeah. Barbara, as I said, it was mentioned and we did talk about it, but unfortunately I cannot tell you exactly what our conclusion was, and I don't see it now in the text either. But it was addressed.
Yeah, but I think it's something we need to address as we go forward. So thank you for that. That's really, really helpful. We'll look back in our notes of the meeting and see what was. It didn't appear in the draft, but it certainly should as we go forward. Anybody else like to comment on this? I don't see any hands up. So I'll move on to the next section, which are the enablers. And this section was really, how do we, you know, what are the, this was borrowed from an idea that Helena got hold of a health charter, and in there we, rather than just set out a kind of set of principles and issues, what would be the things would actually help the field develop this area of work. And as you can see, we've identified 5 main ones. The capacity issue, you know, the building of human capacity and know-how for this field. It's something I've been working on for a long time, actually building up people's interest and ability to manage the kind of data flows. Secondly, improving the knowledge base management and analysis that we need to do as a sector. Third, to have appropriate technology, adopting it and adapting it, and addressing the huge issues sometimes of compatibility, which gets into you know, issues of databases speaking to each other and that kind of thing. And then finally, the issue of, fourthly, the issue of investment resource mobilization. And finally, kind of engaging and advocating the promotion of data and value and importance. So, you know, having the resources, and B, raising the issues, which I hope that, in a sense, that through one of the things which came out at the meeting was that we shouldn't be looking at a perfect document as the outcome of this work, that we should be really working on the processes, that these kinds of conversations, the charter shouldn't be just something that sits on a shelf gathering dust. It should be there in the active participation of the people in the field, actually talking to each other, sharing. It's what, you know, the charter should be about what people do as much about how they actually what's actually written. Penelope? Would you like to say something?
Yes, hi. This is Penelope Lewis from, I run the Foundations Program at the World Bank. And I was really sorry not to be able to make the meeting, but I'm very, very interested in this initiative, which I think is very timely and very positive, and applaud the work you considerable work you obviously got through at the meeting. And this is thank you, Barry, this is a very interesting presentation of that. I was interested in this part, what you're calling the enablers, and wanted to ask you if, and this is sort of slightly connected to, well, I guess all of it, but particularly the fifth point, whether or not when you were doing the sort of background research for this, you found a sort of uniform demand from the philanthropic community. Is this, you speak of yourself as facilitators in drawing up this charter, and I just wondered if, you know, interacting with the philanthropic community globally, if you felt that there was demand generally from the community, or if it was kind of patchier, or if it was being pushed more by, you know, kind of one type of, or one part of the philanthropic community also in terms of location, or if this was something very much driven by a rather more uniform demand.
Well, my own perspective on that is that is that it's a very widespread demand. It comes from all over the place. It comes from, for example, the newly emergent community foundation movement via the Global Fund for Community Foundations. There's an upsurge in the demand for data and analysis there. Yesterday I was at a meeting with the EFC where we were talking about the importance of having good data. Almost everywhere I go, those kinds of conversations are taking place, and they certainly weren't taking place even 5 years ago. With foundations thinking that they need to justify their expenditure, to evaluate their impact. The imperatives are increasing all the time. I don't think there's any one single sort of driver of this. I think Wings has responded to multiple places coming forward. I don't know whether, Helena, you want to add to that?
Hi,
No?
Barry. That's not at the moment.
No. Okay. Bev, do you want to say something?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hello?
Yeah. Hello.
Hi, this is Bev from South Africa. Hello, everyone. It's nice to be connected to everyone again. Barry, just one comment. I wonder if, and I'm probably speaking more from a third world perspective here, that one of our enablers shouldn't be to look at, once again, access and awareness creation around this initiative. And when I say access, I'm also talking about possibly technological access. Now, this might be already covered under capacity or maybe to some extent knowledge or technology, but I think it's quite an important aspect that to some extent a principle of the Charter under the enablers needs to make sure that, you know, smaller foundations in third world countries who may not have access and awareness and knowledge of all these kind of things can be sort of consciously an awareness created amongst them, and possibly enabling access amongst them as well.
Yeah. Well, I think that's an important point. Thank you, and I think that's something that you know, Wings is well placed to do, because it, as Anna said at the beginning, it's one of the few genuinely global organizations that can reach you know, every part of the world. I think that's something that, you know, we really do need to take on. Anybody else want to talk? And there's no hands. Rosa, did you want to say something? Oh, Rosine.
Yeah, maybe in response to Penelope's question, I think I would agree with Barry that there, at least in Europe, you see a broad spread urgency to access data. But it is also true, and I think that's also a part of these enablers, that they are an investment, and in a very diverse environment, those investments can be considerable. I think Barbara also mentioned the unlocking data that are already there, and I think that from our perspective, it's really important to collaborate with other actors also outside the sector of foundations to make sure that that you can share that investment, because if it has to come only from the foundation sector, in some countries it's very, very small also as a sector. So
and that connects with the point that Pushpa was making earlier, that we need to connect across sectors and not just look at data that's within. We don't want to become an inward focusing field. We need to connect outside with governments, development agencies, all sorts of other actors, private sector too. And
academia, for that matter.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I was sort of taking that as read. Yeah. Okay. No other speakers at the moment. I'm going to move on. That's where you contact us. Let's have we've still got some time. Anybody like to make any? I mean, there are. I'm interested in two main things now. One is, have we got any general comments? And two, how should we? I mean, we don't have a fixed view of this consultation. I'd like to, to also to hear from you about how we progress this initiative. What we, we've had some really valuable comments today, but I don't want to lose all you guys, and like to keep you involved, and would like to ensure that you have the opportunity to carry on sort of participating in this and influence the way we do things. So can I take the first of those questions first? Are there comments that people want to make generally about this initiative, things we could improve as the document goes forward? Any other things that you wanted to say during the session that you don't feel you've said yet? No? I don't see anybody.
Hi, I'm Pushpa.
Oh, hi, Pushpa.
Yeah, Pushpa from GuideStar India. Two things. One is, I was wondering if the survey that you presented at the meeting, if that could be, the findings could be shared with those of us who couldn't make it to the meeting, to get a kind of overall perspective about what are people looking at and what are their views. Yeah. And the second is, I think overall I missed two words in this whole context about transparency and accountability. Okay. From the part of the world that I come from, there is a lot of transparency and accountability that is expected of organizations supported by foundations. But since I work with number of those organizations, there's always been a kind of need to see, similar attributes in the foundation community or the giving community. Even if it is there, sometimes that doesn't get communicated. Also, there's this wide spectrum of the philanthropic community. There are a lot of high net worth individuals who are going to be setting up foundations. They are the newer foundations and the older foundations, and there's sometimes best practices that are not known or that don't flow to the newer organizations. So something in the values about this being voluntary in nature, too, since it's voluntary, can one kind of talk about being transparent or promote transparency and accountability within the community was something, the second point that that was coming to my mind.
Thank you, Pushpa. Those, I mean, the first one is very simply dealt with. Yes, we can certainly make those, make that survey, the results of the survey available to people. We want to continue to develop a survey. We wouldn't ask quite the same questions, but we do want to give people the opportunity to contribute online to this discussion in a fairly structured way. And this discussion has been very helpful in kind of improving and enhancing the sorts of questions we would want to ask. And the second point, the more substantive one in terms of transparency and accountability, is a very good one. Thank you. Anybody else like to contribute there? No. Shall we move on then to how would ways in which we should actually, because we are, you know, as Helena pointed out, a very early stage, ways in which we could improve on this consultation process and involve you further, things that you'd like us to do. And I mean, not necessarily that we can deliver all of them, but how can we make this a kind of useful process? Rosine?
Yeah, I'm thinking on the one hand, and I think that it's an important process in sort of trying to formulate in this charter a vision and aspirations. And I think we'll find that in the course of time there will remain things that are different and where we may not exactly agree, but there are definitely also elements that are part of a shared vision. I think on the other hand, as when you look at the charter as a starting point for concrete action, then it's still there are still too many unresolved things. And at the same time, there is also a lot of action going on. So I wondered if in that consultation process, what exactly do we want to see at the end of the process? And that ambiguity is also a bit in the document, which is on the one hand a charter formulating a vision and principles and values, and then the other hand it has elements of an action plan. And I wonder if it would be useful for the consultation process to acknowledge that that there is a difference in those two things, and in part of the consultation can then also be sort of bringing together a little bit of all the action that's going on already, or which may differ broadly from in regions, in countries, etc. Yeah.
And there's a tension between, you know, being very clear about where you want to end up and being very inclusive and flexible in terms of a process that you want to go through. I think at this stage where we are now, I'd favour the kind of idea that we take on all sorts of different kinds of views and try to make the thing have a shape as we go through it, and I do note the tension that you sort of identify as being between being a charter and being a kind of an action plan. And at the moment, it is trying to do, as it were, both of those things. I think we need some things to happen around data that aren't necessarily the same thing as a charter. And this may be a reflection of the state of evidence in the field. So I think we need to be a bit careful about shutting things down before we've actually really fully understand what we're dealing with. Other people who'd like to comment on the next stages on the consultation.
Yes, Barry, this is Rosa. I mean, Yeah, it is something that, although it was mentioned in Rio, as today there are people attending that were not there, as we will be taking the consultation somehow to Europe, and we'll take advantage of the Daphne meeting in Copenhagen, and we have already set up a session that will be conducted by Larry McGill from the Foundation Center.
Right.
Because it is interesting, there is a big appetite from Daphne members in everything that has to do with data, and it was something that already came in our last meeting in January in Kiev, so before the Rio meeting, and I mean, we will take this opportunity to present the charter and also to get more Europeans involved, and with involving the Daphne members, we are involving some of the organizations that are collecting more data in each individual country. So that's, I mean, I mentioned this in Rio already, but I mean, I would like to say today for all the people that could not attend the meeting in Rio.
Well, thank you. That's evidence more of more kind of demand for data, which is good. Other thoughts? Anybody else? Okay. And anybody else like to say anything before I hand back to Anna to summarize? You know, for any final words. No, I think we're. Thank you very much, all of you, for all of these really useful contributions, which we'll be. Anna has been taking notes, and we will listen to the recording and act accordingly. Thank you so much for today. Anna, over to you.
Oh, thank you very much, Perry, for presenting the charter to everyone. I hope that whoever wasn't at the meeting in Rio could get a sense of it, and that's a work in progress, and that any comments and opinions about it are very welcome, and we're open to discussions on it and on the sections and the structure and what's on the charter, really. And you can just email me if you have any questions. And we also have a page on our website exclusively for the data charter. And I'll add updates to that page. So this webinar will be there too, and the meeting in Rio, and anything as an examples about organizations using data around the world and why it's important to have a data charter to try to get standards on data collection in the field. So all this information and the recording will be available to you, and I'll be sending the survey as Pushpa requested to everyone, so you can see the results too. So thank you everyone for joining us, and please feel free to send us any questions or comments at any time. Thank you.